Okay, we have the presentation. Terrific. Well, got everything? Thank you so much for joining us, and good afternoon. I'm very excited that all of you could join us today to hear the tremendous progress that's underway for both Hillman Garage and City Dock. I wanted to take just a minute so the City Dock Action Committee can reflect on the incredible success you've had, the hard work and the commitment which each of you put into the consensus plan. And that was 1 year and 2 months ago. And here we are today looking at some of the early drawings and the work for City Dock and Hillman Garage. We certainly would not be where we are if it weren't for all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This afternoon, David Gerald is with us. He is leading this entire undertaking. He's coordinating it, leading it, directing all of the departments, doing an amazing job. We have Robert Clark, our partner and president of Historic Annapolis, Senator Elfreth, who has been critical in helping us with funding mechanisms. We also have Representative Henson with us today. We're delighted. And we have Alderwoman Tierney. I think we also have on the call, and thank you for joining us, Alderman Arnett and Alderwoman Pindell Charles. The AMRP team, we have Ivan Doolin, the project manager, and Bryce Turner, and the superintendent of the Park Service Chesapeake Bay office, Wendy O'Sullivan, rearranged her schedule to join us today, and we thank you. And we have Chris Haley, who will be leading our City Dock Legacy team, also Joe Rubino kicking off the discussion. So with that, we will be holding questions until the presentation is over, because we want to have a lively and robust discussion with all of you, and we want to get to hear everyone's ideas and recommendations. So with that, 2 slides up, Robert Clark. Is Robert on?
Robert, I think you're on mute.
Robert, can you hear us?
Try now.
Okay, do we have Robert?
I have Robert.
The rest of us don't. Now we hear you. Turn
Okay.
it over to you.
All right. So thank you, Eileen. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Historic Annapolis continues to be grateful to continue serving as a champion of this broader effort. We strongly believe that preservation has an important role in this because of our historic fabric, our historic feel, which is the backbone of the city. It's critical that we retain the sense of place, historic significance, and context. Working together, we will do just that. We all have been fundamental players in the process, and a lot of hard work that's been done by professionals and volunteers leading up to this point is extraordinary. The synergy is palatable. We look forward to working with new partners through the consortium, as well as growing relationships with other organizations to include Baltimore Gas, Verizon, and Comcast. I want you to picture for a second, when we're talking about this slide, I want you to think about driving 2 stakes in the ground. One stake represents July 4th, 2026. As we all know, that will be the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Drive another stake in the ground on March 25th, 2021. So the 63 months between the 2 stakes, we're planning to do a lot of things. But I wanted everybody to sort of have a sense that 63 months is not a long time. Now, I wouldn't want to try to hold my breath that long, but in the scheme of things, it's not so long. So the next thing to happen, as everybody knows, I'll be boastful here, there's going to be a citywide exhibition attempting to tell a history of our city. It's going to be in 10 locations. It's every museum. It's the Naval Academy Museum, it's the State House, and so on. June of 2022, Watermark turns 50 and HA turns 70. We think that's a high watermark. And then, of course, the ribbon cutting on the completion of the City Dock, Hillman Garage, Main Street projects. All very exciting, all within that period of time. The combination of all of these activities should produce an economic thunderbolt. Building owners and business owners need to be prepared. I hope to see you all soon and often. We shall continue to conduct these informational sharing Zoom calls so that we all can stay informed and excited. It's now my pleasure to turn the program over to my state senator, Sarah Alfred. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Robert. And Eileen, thank you as always. You are the chief herder of cats to make sure that this project sees completion. And so I just want, as both the senator from the capital city and a neighbor, my house is just off the screen here. I care so deeply about this project, and I know our entire delegation does, Delegate Henson, who is with us, and Delegate Jones as well. This kind of represents, it represents the best of what happens when city, county, state, federal, nonprofits, the Naval Academy, national parks, everybody's pulling in the same direction. Just some updates from the State House as it relates to this project. Last year, we passed the Resilience Authority legislation that the city and the county are now working together to form this Resilience Authority to help leverage funds to pay for this project. The state continues to invest money in addressing flood mitigation. We'll see over $1 million in new state money this year for issues of flooding around the city dock. And we can continue to invest. Last year, we put some money into the Burtis House, and I have to give a shout out to Wendy O'Sullivan, who has just been an incredible partner, as well as HA in Preservation Maryland, to see that Burtis House, once completed, is really going to be a cultural hub for the entire city and frankly for the entire state, which we're so very excited for. So I think I'm here, Eileen, to say thank you to everybody for continuing to pull in this direction. An idea is only as good as its execution, and we're seeing all of this come to fruition in real time. 63 or 64 months, Robert, feels like a long time off, but if we continue to have this kind of partnership and these kinds of meetings and stay on track, it will be here sooner than we know it. So thank you, everybody, for continuing to invest in this critical project for not just the city, but I can tell you for the entire state of Maryland. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. I'd like, we can stay with this slide, but I'd like to, I think Representative Henson has joined us and would love to hear your comments.
Thank you, Eileen, for your leadership throughout this process. Thank you, Robert and Historic Annapolis and all of our historic partners that are making sure that preservation is certainly an important part of this project. To the National Park Service as well. In the House, one of the things that we realized is that the use of our parks has really doubled and tripled in some cases during the pandemic. People really want to get out and experience nature and the scenery and all the things that we love and enjoy outside in the outdoors. And so to know that this plan incorporates so much of those features and that we have an emphasis on that is really forward thinking, and it really shows the visionaries that were at the table to get over 30 people to come together to agree on a plan and to have that plan be something that even the pandemic, which changed many things, this plan is still a good and solid plan, and it still fits the needs of the city of Annapolis, even after a major change like we've all just experienced. So it's great to see that you really had a collection of visionaries that were there and came out with a really true and solid plan. So I'm excited for the update, as I'm sure everybody else is, to hear where we are now. It's good to see the partners from Annapolis Mobility that are on, to see that they've taken on this task of helping us with the Hillman Garage and doing the redesign there. So I'm excited for the updates from the city, and it's good to see my former members on the council together, to see Alderman Arnett and Alderwoman Tierney, who I know are keeping a careful eye on this project and have done so for many, many years. So thanks so much, Eileen.
Thank you very much. And now we have the council person for the district, and we have an appropriate slide for you, Alderman Tierney. Next slide. There you go. You're muted, Ellie.
Sorry, I know that's very appropriate. I've been complaining about Hillman for how many years now, so it's finally happening. But thank you, Eileen. As always, I'm delighted to be the cheerleader, mostly because it is my ward, and perhaps because I can speak from my construction experience. And it does make me remember the advice I was given when I led pre-construction efforts with Turner Construction Company, was that pre-construction was the time to get it right. And what I mean by right, I mean sensitivity to the design, being on schedule, and of course, inevitably the funding. And right now, I truly believe with this team of experts run by you, Eileen, and David Jarrell, and the partnership that we have with Historic Annapolis, I have no doubt that we will get it right. Because as I learned, if we don't, the odds are usually against us, but I have no doubt we're on the right path. So thank you again for letting me be the cheerleader in chief here.
And thank you. Next slide. We need your cheerleading. And the city manager is really the person who is making all of this happen within the city structure. David, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eileen, and you're far too generous. We know who's herding the cats for this project. There's no doubt about that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We continue to be very excited about this project. Thanks especially to the Action Committee. We wouldn't be here today without all of you, so thank you, thank you. Also, thanks to Historic Annapolis and National Park Service for the great partnership that we have enjoyed together on this project. So where are we right now? We're in the pre-development stage, as Ellie mentioned. We signed the agreement with AMRP back last fall, and so work is underway. So that's great. The first order of business was to do the feasibility analysis that really lays the groundwork for this whole project. So data collection has been ongoing, gathering parking information for all the city garages, for all the surface lots in the city, for all the on-street parking as well, so that AMRP will know what the parking demands are on a going forward basis. This has been a very extensive process, as you can imagine, especially with COVID, because parking has changed pretty dramatically during this last year, but we fully expect that the parking demand will recover as we come out of this current crisis. So thank you to ADOT and thank you to SB Plus for all of your support in this data gathering effort. AMRP has also started the site investigation work for both City Dock and for the Hillman Garage site. So that includes the surveys, geotech studies, some of the archaeological work as well. So next slide, please. So we have set up to engage the city departments with AMRP. We've set up 4 separate subcommittees to work through the various issues associated with the project. So the first one is the technical subcommittee, and that's for city staff, that's mostly public works and planning and zoning. We have a mobility and parking subcommittee, which the Department of Transportation, SB Plus are involved with AMRP. We have public outreach, which of course Eileen is leading that group, and Mitchell Stevenson from the mayor's office is participating in that. And then we have a finance committee. So we're going to look at all things related to the financing for this project. We've also done a lot of public outreach already, as you can see from this list, but the key ones, we briefed the city council last week. That was the second briefing that they have received on this project, and they will continue to receive at least quarterly briefings on the status and progress of the project. We also had a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and HPC, which I thought was very successful and had great discussion back on February 25th. And we met with the Ward 1 Residents Association the week before that. So lots more in the future, but we've started to do what we said we were going to do, and that's to get public involvement with this project. It's going to be key to the success. And so we're going to continue with this effort. And of course, with Eileen involved and leading that effort, there's no doubt that this is going to be done properly. So with that, I'm going to introduce our AMRP partners. So Ivan Doolin is the project lead for AMRP. He's with Hunt Companies. And you all know Bryce Turner. He's here as well. He was an integral part of the Action Committee. So we're so happy to have him part of this project as well. So Ivan and Bryce, over to you.
Thank you, David, and want to thank everybody for the opportunity to provide a bit of an update. I know everybody's excited about the project, and we continue to remain very excited about the project and the opportunity and what this represents. So, if we can jump to the next slide. So just a little bit of recap of kind of where we are and what we're doing. And you heard some of it from David already, but through this process or pre-development agreement process, what we are doing is developing the project, so both Hillman Garage and City Dock together with the city in a true partnership fashion. As David mentioned, there are several working groups that have been set up and that will be continuing throughout this entire process, which we've divided into a couple of different sub portions. So what we're doing now is we're in the beginning by what you can see on the screen here, the feasibility review, where we are going back and evaluating a lot of data and information, cross-checking things. Based on that, we will kind of define a more specific program associated with the two different projects before we then run into a more detailed development work, kind of which then leads up to closing on or signing the agreement and closing on the financing for Hillman Garage. And then subsequent to that, there'll be a little bit more development work and design development work on City Dock before we start construction on City Dock. So, and through this process, what we're effectively doing is evaluating different options and trying to optimize the project. As Alderwoman Thierry mentioned, it's if you get it right in pre-construction and development, you're well on your way to having a successful project, and that's why we have this time period now is precisely to do that, to make sure that we're building the right project. So we can jump to the next slide. So what we're doing right now is a lot of data gathering, a lot of review of parking information and mobility information, as David mentioned. We're also spending a fair amount of time on updating schematic designs for both Hillman Garage and City Dock, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And starting doing some kind of physical and desktop investigations around geotech and environmental and kind of your standard construction project type investigations. In addition to that, we've undertaken been part of several outreach activities, and I have to say we're from Amrp side really impressed with the proactive nature and the cooperation that the city has set up with the different interest groups around this project. It bodes very well and is a model that other cities and municipalities should look to in the future. It's been a very successful. Also have to stress that we have a very good relationship with the city and city staff, and we couldn't be more pleased with how kind of we've kicked this process off. So it's jumping to the next slide. So just a couple of updates from our side on the outreach side. So I know there's a lot of questions about the project, even though it is early. There's several questions coming in naturally due to the interest in the project and what will be developed. So we will be, we're in the process of developing a website where the public can get some more information regarding the project. It will have some frequently asked question and answer pages to provide some more detail around kind of what's happening and timing of activities and what can be expected. We will also, as part of the project development, be in cooperation with the city defining goals and a program around MBE, DB, and SB participation for the project. It is still very, very early, but in subsequent updates, we'll have more information around that. And also want to highlight that as part of the website, there will be an ability for MBE, DB, and SB firms to register interest in the project so that we can pick up and communicate with those firms as we go along the development and the program gets more set and we can kick off that process in earnest. If we jump to the next slide. So one of the things that, as I mentioned, we've been spending a fair amount of time on is developing the design for both the city dock and Hillman projects here. And if we skip to the next slide, as I mentioned last time I was here giving a bit of an update, one of the things that we want to do is balance out or keep and balance out the access to the water, which is integral to the city, with the added resiliency protection which the project is trying to address. And getting that balance right is really important for not only the vitality of the city, but the felt experience and kind of right sizing of the project. So we have been spending a fair amount of time looking at and further developing the options that we produced for bid last year. One of the things that we're doing and looking at is how we can provide more shading and cover as well. It's key to bring in and break up what is otherwise a pretty large space. In addition to kind of the shading it provides, also kind of balances out the scope and scale of the felt space. So you'll see a couple of updates around that. The other thing that we're doing is we are addressing these items a little bit in different sections throughout the area around City Dock. And what we wanted to do now is show some initial designs of how the additional resiliency can be incorporated as part of a wider public space and park space. So if you can jump to the next slide. One of the design aspects that is included or central to the new city dock design is promenade around the entire city dock area, so along the entire waterway. One of the things that we are carefully studying now is what is the correct sea and flood level height to design to. And by that, I mean, what is that we want to build and provide a project that provides protection not only in the immediate years following completion, but also several years into the future. But we also want to, the easy way to provide protection is naturally to create a large wall or bulkhead, but that detracts both from a views and water access standpoint. One of the ways in which it can be done is through incorporating movable barriers and things of that nature, which has a price tag associated. And one of the things that we're very conscious about is balancing out the right level of cost for the project for the protection it provides. In other words, there's very little value in over designing something where the majority of the resiliency infrastructure wouldn't really be needed for, say, 30, 40 years. So that's why getting that design height correct is so important, and why we've been spending so much time around this. So if we can jump to the next slide. So I should have said the initial bulkhead, or the bulkhead that's there that was produced or constructed in 2015 is what you see to the left on your screen. That's kind of the what I'll refer to as elevation 5, effectively kind of the height of the existing bulkhead. One of the things that we are looking to do is how can we utilize the infrastructure that's there? There's no need and value, candidly, in ripping out something that has been produced recently, if it works for the intended purpose. So what we're trying to do is build off of that elevation 5. That is an elevation that for most likely many years to come will provide a good baseline flood protection. And then what we're doing, or as an example of what can be done, is then creating a separate new bulkhead or flood wall further inward of the existing bulkhead of around 6 or elevation 6 or so. So a small wall that can be used for seating and things of that nature, but which has a flip up gate included, which if there was a substantial flood event in the future, then provides that added protection by swinging up and providing a protection against kind of an elevation 8. So, and if you look at the rendering, a smaller rendering on your screen, you'll see how that baseline wall would then follow and provide that long promenade space along Ego Alley while you have this flip up barrier to provide that protection in the extreme events. So this is one example of how we can combine both water access and maintain views while still providing that additional protection down the line for larger events. If we flip to the next slide, here's an alternative of that gets you a lot of the same protection, just through a use of a little bit different technology, and that is the utilization of a transparent flood wall, or effectively a large plane of glass that's mounted on top of a smaller wall. This has the benefit of providing a little bit more promenade space, and the flood wall itself has the benefit of providing a little bit better views through you won't have any type of barrier, so you have naturally a little bit better views through the transparent wall. It also provides some wind protection and some other features that can be beneficial. So these are kind of some of the different types of designs that we are kind of evaluating for the promenade to provide that protection while still providing water access. So if we can flip to the next slide. Another key component, which Delegate Henson mentioned, is the park space. And I think everybody, if they didn't appreciate parks before, I think everybody definitely appreciate parks now after the year that we've had, and access to park spaces is increasingly important for not only as kind of a lung for the city, but as a space where people can meet and come together. And it is an attraction that we see is used not only during the summertime, but more and more year round. One of the things that we are doing now is looking at the programming of the park space and public areas, and Bryce will tell you a little bit more about that later in the presentation. We're also going to be kind of incorporating as part of the design areas in which cultural and historic monuments it can be incorporated or placed. We want to do this ahead of time so that doesn't become an afterthought, and there's kind of incorporate that the celebration of the city dock's history within the design of the park and the public spaces, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. In addition to that, we're exploring the ability of converting the what's now the Donner parking lot into a park space as well. There's some benefits from of doing so, both from a kind of resiliency design and flood mitigation measure, as well as tying together the park space on both sides of the river and Ego Alley will help make it a cohesive space. So that's something that we're excited about exploring and hopefully can move forward here over the next couple of months. So if we jump to the next slide and talk a little bit about Hillman Garage. So what similarly to City Dock, we've been spending a fair amount of time looking at updating the conceptual design and improving upon the design that we produced for as part of the proposal. One of the ways in which we're doing that, we've been moving around ramps and layouts in the garage itself to make it a more pleasant kind of parking experience, to make kind of wayfinding easier and things of that nature. So we're excited about some of those improvements, and we'll be able to talk to those in more detail at a later date. But wanted to now show you a little bit kind of where kind of which direction we're headed. So if we can jump to the next slide. So one of the things, just to show a kind of a brief comparison or set the stage, and a brief comparison compared to where the existing garage today. So you'll see that's you all are well familiar with the garage, but want to point out a couple of things. One is you'll see kind of immediately outside of the garage, there's no walkway. So when you're exiting the garage, you actually have to cross Gorman Street before you can head out towards Main Street, which isn't ideal from a safety standpoint. You'd want the ability to exit the garage on foot and have a little bit of time to look around before crossing the street. While there are some areas that's possible, that is one area that we see some we can improve. The other is kind of what I keep on referring to as kind of the felt experience of the garage. It's quite imposing currently with large stair towers in the front and ramps crossing in the front of Gorman, which has a very kind of imposing impression. So if we can flip to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about which direction we're headed. So in front, you'll see kind of the current conceptual design that we're working on, and you can see it's more in keeping with the general aesthetic of Annapolis. We're using more brick in the facade. We are dividing up the facade so it's not as massive and imposing. We've relocated the stair towers to kind of the middle of the building to avoid having those kind of be the first thing that you see from the exterior. As I mentioned, some of this is possible to do by kind of moving the ramp location. It creates a better kind of overall visual impression. As you can see as well, the openings on the ground floor, what's kind of indicated here in black metal, you'll see are areas in which can be repurposed and used for kind of pop-up spaces and things of that nature for different events. So it will have some adaptable reuse criteria. So overall, I think we're pleased with the direction that this is headed, and I think provides a better scale to fit in the area surrounding it. If we just quickly jump to the next slide. There you go. That's the view from the other side. So as I mentioned, if we skip one further ahead for comparison. Yes, so we think this will help just make it Gorman Street a more kind of appealing street to be on. The garage will be, we're hoping to be able to set back the garage to have more space and generally contribute to activation of the street. So it becomes kind of incorporated into the downtown area. So you've now heard me drone on for quite some time, so I'll stop now and hand it over to Bryce, which can give you a little bit more detail on kind of some programming and items that we're doing around City Dock.
Next slide.
Thank you, Ivan. I appreciate it. And it's great to be with the City Dock Action Committee again. You know, it was nice to hear our leaders talking about this vision. And we're really fortunate to have all these people come together with the Action Committee and others and be able to create this consensus plan and a vision for what we can do at City Dock and how Hillman can make all that happen. And so I feel like, as many of you do too, we are the keepers of the vision. We have to keep this rolling. And I'm pleased to report that all the detail that you're starting to see and that Ivan was just talking about, the team is working very hard to, you know, to develop that detail and that understanding and that design in a way that will allow this greater vision that we see, like in this slide here. Next slide, please. So one of the things, you know, and the team's doing a great job. It includes WSP, the civil engineers who are working on the resiliency piece. It includes Mahan Reichel, who's a landscape architect, who's working with us, and my team at BCT, and really pleased with how they're working together with the city and others. It's a lot of people and a lot of important discussion that has to happen to make all that detail go on. But in terms of the bigger picture and this vision that we need to keep an eye on, programming is a big part of it that we talked about in the Action Committee. And so when you look at this grand vision of City Dock that we have here, we are still planning on very much something very similar to this. Of course, everything changes a little, but we're also thinking about what that programming can be. The Action Committee had a robust programming effort that was put together that I thought was very successful. We've now even heard from others. The mayor has gathered a group of people that are also providing some additional information. So how can we tell the story at City Dock of the things that have happened here in these, you know, these hundreds of years that City Dock has been active in Annapolis? You know, how do we talk about the African-American story here, about the lives of people who have touched this place, and further about the watermen who've made a living here and other people who've come here for pleasure. And I think we're starting to think about how you can inscribe and tell that story within the paving, you know, within plaques, within reenactments that might happen on this park. And so we're making sure that we've got the infrastructure for all that type of thing to happen. I think it's very exciting, and that's something that's going to be very discussed in a lot of depth here in the coming months. So you'll hear more about that, but I think it's important to remember why we want to do all this stuff. Next slide. So just to jump into a little bit of detail with our pump house, the former Harbor Master building, which we're downsizing, and we're able to locate within this building some of the pumps that are going to be needed in order to prevent the backflow, if you will, from water coming up through the drains that we've had with some of the nuisance flooding, you know, in the past. So that's going to be very important. And we're looking at the elevations of all of that equipment and a lot of detail that I won't bore you with. But it's also critical to have public toilets here. You know, that's how we make it a great public space. And we've learned that lesson from places like Bryant Park in New York and others. But on the second level of that, on the right-hand side of this image, these are floor plans, obviously, but we think there may be room for an upper level viewing deck, and there could be some programming that can happen in that space. And that could be one of the places where people gather to celebrate history. Next slide. So this was a view, and I believe the action committee's probably seen this image before, but this was part of the proposal that the AMRP team put together. It was a potential reimagining of that harbor master building within that same footprint. But more importantly, we're thinking about how we can incorporate some brick, but also loosen it up a little bit with some other active features, and especially the idea of a pop-up fountain. I think we're all very committed to doing. We're studying how that can happen now, and how this park and what elevation this park wants to be, such that it can really provide the major foundation for our resiliency plan by being elevated enough to allow the flood system, the resiliency plan to really work by pushing it back out to the harbor, if you will. So next slide. And just a couple more views of this building. This design will be refined, and we'll be incorporating more ideas as we work with others. And so this hasn't really changed since the proposal. Next slide. Let's see one last view of this. And so we're also looking at this, and now we're thinking about that harbor master function and how that can be incorporated possibly with the Burtis House, and Wendy O'Sullivan may speak about that a bit more later. But so these are going to be the structures that we'll have at City Dock, and together with some of the shading that Ivan spoke about, we want to make sure that we've got a very comfortable place that's going to be successful for all the citizens of Annapolis, and that's what's going to attract other people to tourists from other places too. So we're very excited about where all of this is heading. I can, again, I'm pleased to report that we are keeping with the vision, and I think we've got all the elements that we all hope to have there. And of course, we're just working through the details now and making it a reality. Next
Right,
slide.
thanks so much. The next slide, and I'd like this to go to David.
Thank you, Eileen. So I'm just going to talk briefly about sort of the economics of this project, how we're going to finance it. So, and this is a great oversimplification, but it talks about the sort of the concepts involved. So right now there's a parking study going on. It's going to be an investment grade parking study that will determine the parking demand and the estimated revenue from the new parking garage for the next 30 years. So using that information, AMRP and the financing folks that are part of the team will use that estimated revenue to determine how much capital financing, bond financing that can be supported with that revenue that's going to be produced by the garage. So based on that amount of capital financing, which will need to be split into three parts, the first part being the Hillman garage development. The second part is the developer fees for doing this project. So the money that's going to go back to AMRP and to Hunt and the other companies involved to pay for their services. But then the third component is the payment to the city, right? So there's going to be money that's going to flow out of Hillman Garage back to the city, and then a portion of that can be used for City Dock. But we also need to use a portion of it to continue to pay for the transit system, which is supported by parking revenues. So it's important to keep in mind that this is sort of a zero-sum game, the financing for these projects. So if the cost of Hillman Garage goes up, it takes money away from what will be paid to the city for City Dock and other uses. So what we're trying to do is to control the cost of Hillman Garage. As you all know, we are height limited at that site, and we want to add at least 575 parking spots there. We have 425 now, so we want to increase it by at least 150 spots. which is a difficult thing to do within the same footprint without going higher. And we really don't want to go deep underground because underground parking is extremely expensive. So that's the quandary that we're trying to work with now. And that's sort of the correlation between the cost of the garage and what the city's going to get for city dock and for other city purposes. So again, that was kind of a simplified discussion, but hopefully that's clear of how the revenues and the cost of Hillman are going to help determine the amount of money that we get for city dock. And happy to answer questions about that later. But right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Wendy O'Sullivan, our partner from National Park Service. She's the superintendent of the Chesapeake Bay office. And Wendy, thank you for being part of this project.
Great. Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wendy O'Sullivan. I'm the superintendent for the National Park Service Chesapeake Bay office here, based here in Annapolis. The NPS Chesapeake Gateways program covers really the full watershed from Cooperstown, New York, all the way down through the Virginia Tidewater. But as the head of NPS Chesapeake, I'm excited to partner with our hometown here at the heart of the Chesapeake. We are proud to support and help advance the City Dock project, and specifically the stabilization, revitalization, and activation of the Burtis House and Wharf. In partnership with the city, we're committed to ensuring that the Burtis House and a potential addition establishes a world-class asset for this community, and that it has a power of place that links to its maritime heritage and that is welcoming to all and works as a launching point with partners across the city and its maritime districts to connect Annapolis's diverse communities back to their creeks and bay. We're looking forward to supporting the city in its efforts to expand equitable access to the water and outdoors, and to advance inclusive storytelling and cultural connections. NPS Chesapeake is working with partners to develop a master interpretive plan for Annapolis that's going to be shared out and looked through with partners in the city. I'm also serving on the Maritime District Task Force right now, and we're open to and interested in looking at ways that the NPS can help promote a resilient, healthy community, as well as leverage support for local Chesapeake-based industries and economies. I believe that celebrating the Bay is ultimately about people, and I think we all would agree that Annapolis really is a central part of doing that for the entire Bay as a focal point and a gateway. Just to share a little bit what might be on the horizon, you may have heard that Senator Van Hollen has announced in the recent weeks that he is considering legislation to create a new Chesapeake National Recreation Area. While the NPS will wait to take a position on the new national park until the legislation is introduced, I think we'd all agree it's clear that the opportunities in and around Annapolis today and into the future are substantial and extremely exciting. And so just really excited to be part of this effort and look forward to working with this team to bring Burtis forward as this moves ahead. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And I'd like to now introduce Chris Haley, who will be chairing our newest committee. Chris?
Hi, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, everyone who's online today. I just want to make a brief statement because we're really at the beginning of this process, but I'm very excited about it, and hopefully you will be too. First, I'd like to thank you to the Mayor Buckley for asking me to be a part of this effort to create a multicultural experience in the midst of the Epic City Dock Reimagined project. He, Will Rao, and Eileen have welcomed me to assume a leadership role in assisting to gather minds and hearts and physical skills to build something which will represent not only an inclusive and diverse city dock for Annapolis, but an engaging, proud, and warm destination for all visitors from our state and our entire nation. The goal of this multicultural experience, this physical manifestation, this spiritual location, is to instill people of all ethnic backgrounds, religions, humanities, and yes, even political perspectives, to feel that this site has been created to promote the contributions of a worldwide us, not an individual them. One site for all to promote what's right. One site that will shine morning, noon, and night. This effort is a big deal, but it will only be successful if it makes people feel. We are confident that with the team our city has formed and your support, good wishes, and advice, we will. Thanks.
Well, I get goosebumps every time, Chris, I hear you talk about it. It's fantastic. The next slide, please. Hard to go after Chris's incredible energy and really deep felt feelings in that statement. The city and AMRP have been working together to put together, we call it a multifaceted outreach. David earlier described for all of you, all of the business, resident, boards, commissions, council, and the City Dock Action Committee, who have been briefed and will be briefed on an ongoing basis throughout this project. But we wanted to build on the tremendous momentum that's been created by the City Dock Action Committee and have the Action Committee and your working teams provide the basis for engaging with AMRP, and whether that be on water access issues, City Dock legacy, as you just heard from Chris, parking, circulation, park design, all of these issues will use the City Dock working teams and then reach out to the business and residential community, who will also be involved in focus groups and stakeholder interviews as well, because it's going to be really important over the next several months that AMRP gets your input and they get your feedback. That is the best way for us to make sure that this ultimately represents what the entire community envisions. There is also, as you heard Ivan mention earlier, AMRP has brought on a marketing arm. They're putting up together an interactive website. They'll be doing newsletters, social media posts, and very importantly, there'll be an app when the parking garage is under construction, so that people will be directed where to park, what the best location is, what's available. And the other piece of it will be a consistent, ongoing public awareness messaging, events that are tied to milestones, wayfinding signage, but perhaps most importantly for our residents and our businesses, direct contact and the ability to have direct messaging and interaction with AMRP and Whiting Turner during construction. Next slide. So the result of all of this will be throughout the planning and development process. The City Dock Action Committee will be directly involved, and there also will be robust communication to notify businesses, residents, and the public. There are 3 phases that we're looking at. The first phase is what we're in now, pre-development, from January this year to January next year. And that's the planning and development for Hillman and the development of an interim parking and mobility strategy, which is going to be so important for all of our businesses and residents. Second phase is, next slide, please, the City Dock design and development. That will start this summer through summer 22. And that's the design for City Dock and a comprehensive parking and mobility strategy that will go in place after the garage is constructed. And the last phase is the construction phase, starting next winter through February 2024. And again, the emphasis there will be the coordination and the logistics with businesses and residents surrounding construction. Next slide. So I want to thank all of you for getting us here. And this is such an understatement. If you think about 2 years ago, it was actually 2 years ago in March when we first got together. I think it was March 20th, 2019, to start to talk about these ideas. We want to hear all of your questions and ideas. I want to kick that off with Joe Rubino, who I think is on the call right now, but we also have joined us Alderwoman Pindell Charles, Alderman Payon, Alderman Arnett, and Alderman Gay. So Joe, if you're here, if you can kick it off, and then if any of the older people have anything, older persons have anything they'd like to ask, we'll go to them. Joe? Okay, Joe is not here. So with that, I will ask any of the older persons if you want to start the questions and discussion. And for everybody else, just raise your hand. There's a place to raise your hand in the chats. Do we have any questions, comments from any of our older men and women? Nope. And I see we have one of our planning commissioners on. So with that, then I will open this up to everybody's comments. John Hammond.
Thank you, Eileen. Just looking at those slides, it's amazing what you can do with an artistic rendering. Looking at the Hillman parking garage, those drawings all of a sudden raised a question in my mind. Why not consider eliminating vehicular access on Gorman Street? Obviously, you could continue to use the alleyway to the parking garage entrance and the end of Gorman Street for the exit. But is it really necessary to have vehicles going on Gorman Street between the entrance and the exit to the garage? And couldn't that space be more productively utilized for perhaps a bigger garage footprint or a pedestrian walkway?
Well, that's certainly a good question. I'm not sure whether I should put that to David or Ivan. Ivan.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest David, but
That's a hard question.
Yeah, it is. It's not something that we've contemplated at this point. There are always some challenges associated with closing existing roadways for fire access and a lot of other challenges that come into play. I think one thing that we will be doing as we move forward is look to how that can be activated and or that Gorman Street can be activated. And I think it's easier over time to potentially look at items like that after you have a little bit of operational history, as opposed to proposing shutting it down now.
Yeah, I would just add, and John, thank you for your normal out of the box thinking, because I don't think any of us had even talked or thought about that before. But my only concern would be getting out of the garage, right? So you cut the outflow by half, essentially, if you only can exit on the Duke of Gloucester side. And if it happened to get backed up or there were issues on that side, then you'd kind of be out of luck. But certainly something that's worth thinking about, and we will do that.
I'm not suggesting that you not have vehicle exiting on Gorman Street, but the segment between the entrance and the exit seems to
Okay.
be very lightly utilized, mostly utilized by illegally parked cars. And it would seem to me you would get a better buffering of the back end of those businesses and provide better pedestrian flow from the garage to Main Street.
Yeah, John, I can just tell you that, as the architect of the building, we have requirements for access to all sides, but also for the efficiency of the garage, Walker parking really felt like we needed that second exit. It's especially when you get into certain situations with a lot of traffic at one time and with one-way streets. So, that was the thought, but we can certainly bounce it off of them again and see if they think that's possible. We felt like we had a pretty good opportunity here to have a nice pedestrian way already on Gorman Street. I think, as you may have seen in the renderings. So we thought we had the best of both worlds.
And I can add that I spoke with Joe Rubino earlier today about he has a couple of properties that back up onto Gorman Street. And he was enthusiastic about kind of what John described, as well as Bryce, Gorman morphing into something much more energetic and not continue to be back of house and garbage cans. Other comments? Well, we have a quiet bunch today. I'm sorry, who has raised their hand?
We'll do it next with AGLX Zoom. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, sure. Sorry, that's Mark Millay. That's our business account. I want to second what John Hammond just suggested as a really great idea. And this comes to the heels of a discussion that Eileen, Bryce, and team had with the Ward 1 Residents Association. And I think the idea of what Gorman Street could become really deserves more attention. And right now, when you walk down Gorman Street any time of the day, it's a mishmash of delivery trucks that are double parked, illegally parked cars. I think if we really want to turn that into a pedestrian space, we need to create it as a solely pedestrian space. Otherwise, every beer delivery truck and food delivery truck that currently clobbers it is going to continue to do so and make it it will prevent it from becoming as activated as we think. And in those renderings, it looks like it's a 3-lane road. It really is just it's barely a lane and a half, maybe 2 lanes. I also would like to make sure that as we look at the tear down of Hillman, that we're also very cognizant that even with that Gorman activated, Conduit Street activated, the delivery trucks that are now, maybe it's because it's spring and COVID restrictions are being lifted, but the most common complaint that I get as the Ward 1 Association president is double parked delivery trucks in that area. And certainly during the Hillman reconstruction, that's going to be greatly exacerbated. And so I urge everybody here to keep that in mind. That is how we're going to ease the flow and the parking of these large delivery trucks, both during the garage reconstruction and in the plan afterwards, to improve on the situation rather than making it worse. And certainly that very stretch behind all of those facilities, all those buildings and along Conduit Street right now it's just not working, and there needs to be a better solution. Thank you. We're really excited to be active participants in this whole process, and I appreciate everybody's leadership to making this all happen. Thank you.
Mark, thanks so much. And David and I have just received a bunch of those delivery truck pictures from Ward 1. Ellie had her hand up, followed by Bill Kardash and Eric.
Oh, I'm sorry to go before Bill, but just a quick question on design parameter, if you will. And I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyways. What is the basis of the parking count? I know initially it was to replace what we were losing down at the parking lot, but is the potential revenue being balanced with that? I just want to know how you're looking at establishing what that parking count has to be or need to be. I think that might be for
David.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Ivan or Bryce can add to it. So yeah, the original parking count was the 575 was based on replacing the spots that will be displaced down at City Dock. But what we're hoping is that the parking study will drive the number of spaces, which will then drive the revenue. We want to build as many parking spots as the parking study supports. So the mayor's always had a notion of 700, which I'm not sure that will be supported, but we'll know more as the parking study is completed and reports out. So Ivan, anything else to add?
Only thing I'd add to that is in addition to the parking study, it's also kind of the cost of garage in different configurations as David mentioned, because effectively what we want to do is optimize the revenue that the city gets kind of on a per spot basis or net revenue in, and a big chunk of that is then related to construction costs. So that's it's a little bit of a puzzle that then needs to be balanced, but the key component, as David mentioned, is the parking study and kind of being driven by the data that we get back from that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I see Alderman Payon has a question.
Thank you. I guess my question is about the parking on Gorman Street is where do the trucks park if they don't park there? I've got pictures from when during the mayor's ill-fated wrong way bike path, where trucks could not pull up to the front of any of the businesses on Main Street, and they lined conduit block to block. You could hardly make a left turn from Duke of Gloucester onto Conduit Street. I found that it was much worse then than it is now. I mean, what are we supposed to have those trucks parking out on Main Street and blocking the whole travel part of the roadway? That's silly. I mean, I take exception to people offering criticism that don't have a solution to counteract that. And I think it would be disastrous not to allow trucks to park back on Gorman Street in some form or another. I also think that maybe a ticket here and there when they park on the curb on Conduit Street where they're not supposed to might cure that particular problem. I don't disagree that they do park on Conduit. They don't park nearly as badly as they did when the mayor closed off the whole street, but it's a problem. And without a solution suggested, I don't think it's really a valid criticism at this point.
Good points, and thank you, Fred, very much. Bill, finally, it's your turn. Bill Kardash.
Thanks, everybody. I thought the presentation was excellent, by the way. And my question kind of builds on Ellie's comment. And it kind of goes to, I think this is a combination of Bryce and David can address this, but early discussion was that the garage could be as many as 700 spaces. And I heard you say, I think now you're talking more about 575. And now that you're doing this parking study, which is going to project out, I thought you said 30 years or so, when autonomous vehicles might actually be coming to vogue and downtown demand would be less, a smaller footprint downtown would seem to be logical. The other element from a financial perspective was, we continue to hear how the city has an adequate number of parking spaces covered and surfaced, but they're not utilized in the manner that everybody hopes. And so I guess the question is, if we're going to have, whether it's 575 or more spaces downtown, what effort would be linked in to Hillman from a financial perspective that would allow you to benefit from some of that cash flow coming out of Gott's Garage or Knighton Garage or even the Park Place spacing. So it's a matter of whether or not there's enough revenue coming off from those sites to supplement what would be happening downtown.
Thanks, Bill. David, did you want to follow up on that at all, or did Bill made a good enough description?
Yeah, I mean, Bill made great points, and I agree. So the original 575 was what we put in the RFP. I think as sort of a base minimum number of parking spots that we need, and that was based on replacing the spots that are displaced on a city dock. The upwards of 700 are kind of sort of the mayor's vision in order to resolve some of the parking issues downtown. So I people say that there's plenty of parking spots, but they're just not immediately downtown. And Park Place is a good example of that, because they have a very large parking garage that's very underutilized. So so parking spots is not the issue, it's the location of the parking spots that we have. During the time that the garage is under construction, we anticipate that there will be some displacement to the other parking garages, mostly Knighton and Gott's, and to some degree out to Park Place as well. And there's going to be adequate transportation provided to get people downtown during that time. And that's the temporary mobility plan that Eileen's going to work real hard on to make sure that it works out well. That will also contribute additional revenue that will be lost during the time that Hillman Garage is under construction. I'm not sure if I answered your question completely, Bill, but that's kind of the concept of that we're looking at.
Thanks very much, David. Joe just rejoined us. Joe, your comments, and then we're going to go to Carl and John Hammond.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was able to catch some of the presentation. I apologize. I'm fighting some budget battles with the Pentagon, so I kind of coming and going. I don't own my own time these days, but I appreciate the presentation. I like where it's going. I think I had some interest from some of the business folks. I might recall I was on the subcommittee for the kind of business folks downtown Annapolis when we were doing the initial studies, and appreciate Robert, Eileen, and the mayor both spent time with some subsets of those business groups, and I've heard interest from some of them of continuing that dialogue. So I think that was a great model for getting to where we are. Certainly there'll be more interest, and I'd anticipate maybe in the near future getting together with that group again, and I'll reach out to those of you that participated in the past to keep that dialogue up. I think it got a lot of buy-in from the business community to get us where we are, and I think it helped make a plan that everyone appreciates, and I think that's continuing in that direction. And they'll of course be interested in the timing and execution of what comes down when, what gets blocked when construction's going on when. And I think if we just keep that positive dialogue up, like I said, it was a winning model, and I anticipate some more of that coming down the road. So thanks everybody for that feedback and for the time. And that's all I have for now. And I'll shoot a note out at some point when the time is right and work with the leaders of the committee on when we want to try and maybe call that business group together for another little get together downtown. Over.
Yeah, and I think we want to try and do that, with the mayor and the manager within a few weeks, probably not the next week or so, but very shortly. Carl, John, and then we have a question that we will answer from the chat room from Joanne. Carl Larkin.
Well, I too want to thank the committee for the presentation and the parameters around which the presentation was structured. My question goes beyond the parameters of the presentation and asks if the parking study takes into account the impact on the surrounding area. And what I really appreciate is the fact that you identified a focus group that perhaps can provide input to that in the future date. But some of the questions and comments that you received already about the big trucks that park here, but there's also a number of vehicles that park in the neighborhoods nearby. Hopefully that's incorporated in the study and you'll be able to report on that as well.
Carl, thanks very much. You know, all of you may not be aware, Carl is assisting us with the parking issues. People in Ward 1 who have an interest in the study, in the parking and in the impact it might have on their street or their neighborhood have contact me. Carl is keeping track of all of that so that as soon as we are able to sit down with the parking experts and the mobility experts via and the parking group, we will be bringing all of those questions forward to them, and hopefully it will be very shortly, because they need to understand, the consultants need to understand the scope of the issues and concerns the community and the businesses have. Ivan, do you want to add anything to that?
I just add at this point that the parking study looks at more than just Hillman. It looks at kind of the supply and demand of parking in the city, and parking needs to be seen as kind of a system of both kind of on-street and off-street parking, and also with kind of with mobility and how people physically move around the city and what the user groups are. So a lot of that will be incorporated and analyzed as part of the study that we have underway now.
Thanks very much. John Hammond has his hand up, and then I want to respond to Joanne's question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Fred's comment about delivery vehicles. I would hope that as part of the recovery from the pandemic and also this huge construction project, that the city would finally grapple with the management of delivery vehicles downtown. You know, it's an unfettered free delivery zone right now. We do require the trash to be picked up before a certain hour. In my mind, there's no reason why the city couldn't require that all deliveries be made by a certain hour. And there's no reason why the city couldn't mandate that the size of the vehicles be limited. Is there really a need for a tractor trailer beer truck to be downtown when the businesses could be served by a much smaller beer truck? And of course, the larger the trucks, the bigger demand they put on the pavement on Main Street and the city dock. So I think part and parcel of this whole effort is for the city to seize the gauntlet and manage its delivery downtown. And as far as delivery trucks on Gorman Street, there's no UPS truck that can take the alleyway up to get access to Gorman Street. It is a very narrow entrance. Yes, there are delivery vehicles parked at the other end that would remain open on Gorman Street, but they have to back into that space already.
John, thanks. It was some deja vu. It was in the late 80s when I think we were facing the same issues with the size and the timing on the deliveries. We'll make sure that Michael Johnson gets your comments, particularly on that. Joanne Vaughn has asked, and I do not think we have an answer at this point, but it's a good question. What will happen to monthly pass holders at Hillman during construction? I don't think we're ready to answer that, are we?
No, I mean, we're going to definitely work with the monthly pass holders, and if they're interested in the monthly pass at the other garages, then we would certainly just transfer those monthly passes to the other garages. Not sure that that's going to work for all those pass holders, but I think we'll work with each one individually to see what works best for them.
Great. I don't see other questions. You all are very quiet today. Any other thoughts, comments? Oh, Eric, I'm sorry. Eric, you've had your hand up for a while. I apologize. Eric.
Thank you, everybody. It looks like it's gonna be a great project in the end, but you know, as we can tell already, that parking is one of the most favorite topics in this town, whether it's now or in the past. So I really had two questions on parking. Is when do we estimate that we will have the results of the parking study and the beginning of a parking plan? Also related to parking is where do we plan on having the staging area for the garage construction, whether it's removing debris or bringing in new I-beams, et cetera. And then my second question is any long-term major construction project like this is going to have a major impact on businesses. We redid Main Street in 1995. We had many businesses that closed during that period. Is what type of business support are we planning on and prepared to financially support during these multiple years of projects? Thank you.
Get out of here. Go see mommy.
I am wondering who to give that question to.
There's one piece I can respond to, Eileen, which is that we made a couple conscious decisions here about doing a concrete garage, specifically to avoid the transfer of I-beams, if you will, through the city streets, and also avoiding the large precast concrete components that are difficult to transport. So in other words, concrete trucks will come in and then everything will be poured. It'll be almost entirely poured concrete. So maybe that answers part of that question. It's a very tight footprint that we're working within. There's no question about that. And that's why we thought it had to be done in that way. Unlike when Hillman was built the first time with those 60-foot long precast beams.
Is Max with you?
Ivan, did you want to add anything to what Bryce said?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Bryce is a good description from Bryce, and that takes care of a lot of the kind of parking zone aspects. There will be during construction, there will be some loading and offloading zones because of a combination of kind of setting back the existing garage slightly and things of that nature, that we can avoid kind of having long periods of kind of road shutdowns and things of that nature. It's very early, so we don't have all the details around that, but we started to think around how to do that in the least kind of intrusive way. When it comes to timing of parking study and plan for the interim, all I would say is that it's going through just similar to the project and development as a whole is kind of divided into different phases. So will that study be as well? So we're going to have some work completed here in kind of late spring timeframe, and then the kind of a final study later on towards the end of the year. But we'll probably have some more info when we get back to you next meeting.
Thanks very much, Ivan. We have a question from Larry Shubnell.
Thank you, Eileen. In the parking study that's ongoing, curious if thought has been given to looking at the long-term impact of parking off-site. In other words, not bringing so many cars into the downtown area to begin with. Using the stadium lots, perhaps, and even separating tourist parking and visitor parking from local parking, and separating short-term parking from long-term parking, over 2 or 3 hours versus under 2 or 3 hours. Are those factors on the drawing board?
So Larry, let me respond to some of that before I turn this over to Ivan. But I think some of all the work the City Dock Action Committee did was important, but some of the most critical work for this effort now was the work on the parking. And that was just what you said, putting together a mobility strategy that captured people earlier. When I say earlier, with a system of apps and messaging so that people are not driving all the way downtown. And then also an approach that if people park at Gott's is close enough, but if they park at Knighton or they park out at Park Place, or even if they park at the hotel on West Street, that there is a very easy approach to get them in to downtown that is a quick and responsive approach, almost an on-demand approach. So yes, that's a big piece of this, but with that, I'll turn it over to Ivan.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a balance. So I think the way to look at it is the revenue that Hillman generates, as David mentioned, helps fund for the needed improvements at City Dock. So avoiding kind of cutting off cars from Hillman somewhat defeats a little bit of the purpose and the strategy behind the two projects. That being said, I completely understand the concerns around vehicles on kind of local city streets and parking and people hunting for parking in residential neighborhoods and things of that nature. And that's a little bit what Eileen just mentioned about how can we make wayfinding easier. It doesn't help having a parking garage if everybody is either have trouble finding it or incentivized to look for kind of on-street or free parking spaces elsewhere. So what we are doing now is kind of looking at how can we, again, optimize the system as a whole in the area and kind of what is needed from kind of a supply and demand standpoint, just not only now, but in the future.
Ivan, thanks. There's also a chat comment from Bill Kardash that I think David would be good to answer. And that is, have we looked at, or what are the thoughts at this point about Hillman Garage converting to residential or office space?
Thank you, Eileen. Bill, we actually addressed that in the RFP that we wanted the proposals to provide options for repurposing the garage in the future if in fact car parking is not required and you know an additional or an alternative use was needed. And there's a cost that goes with that of constructing a garage that makes it able to be converted to residential or office space. But AMRP has proposed that, so we're really talking through that. Kind of the thought process now is that it's not, believe it or not, it's not that expensive to demolish one of these garages, and most developers who would be taking over and developing residential or office space in that location, if parking isn't needed, would rather start with their own floor plan instead of being stuck with the floor plan that the garage would present. So we're trying to incorporate kind of that thought process and see if it makes sense to at the additional cost build in the repurposing option for the current garage.
Thanks very much, David. We also have a question, and I think we still have Sarah on the line. Is the state legislation looking at allowing signage on Rail Boulevard? I am not aware of any movement on that. Is anyone else?
I'm not sure, Carl. First of all, it's good to get your question, at least if I can't see you. But I'm not sure the state legislation you're referring to. And
Carl, do you want to unmute?
So maybe I could provide some background, Senator Elfreth. So the issue is that SHA won't allow us to put parking information signs on Rail Boulevard because they think it would distract the drivers and be a safety issue. So what we wanted to put out there was these signs that say Hillman Garage, 20 spots, Gott's Garage, 50 spots, and so forth, and direct people through that. But they've been steadfast in and their refusal to not approve those.
Well, it sounds like something we should work on in the interim and come back next session for. We have 19 days left, so happy to work over the next 9 months if that's something the city would like us to work on.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And I know Delegate Henson is on the call as well. Yeah, that's been a long-standing struggle with the signage. Thank you both on that. We also have a comment from Mark Millay about the fact that there are residents in Ward 1 who are interested at this point in time in adding pay for park or park mobile in certain downtown districts. And his question is this something that we can add to what will be looked at when we sit down with the parking consultants in the next couple of months? And I guess that question can go to David or
Yes. The short answer is yes, absolutely. We want to look at that. We've talked with Alderman Tierney. She's very interested in this. So we want that group to look at, and we want that discussion to include the downtown businesses as well, so they are afford the opportunity to lend their perspective on that.
Great. And then we have a comment from John Hammond, which John, you ought to make, since you've got a reference to something else. So why don't you just share your comment with everyone?
The comment was aimed at the State Highway Administration's refusal to allow those signs on Route Boulevard. If you go up to the airport and you're driving along the airport access roads, they're full of those signs directing you to various parking locations, and they don't seem to distract at the airport. With the traffic lights on Route Boulevard, there'd be plenty of time to study the signs coming into town.
Well, John, that's a great observation. I'm more than happy. We have a great transportation secretary. I'm more than happy to call him tomorrow and just plant the seed and see what he says in response to that, and start the ball rolling on this question.
Terrific. Thank you. It would be amazing. This has been many, 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 many years in the making. Did we get, I'm looking here, did we get a question goes to Julian. Have we gotten all the questions and all the comments? Did we miss anyone?
I don't believe so. I think we've gotten them all.
Well, any last chance before we wrap up? Any final comments or thoughts? Raise your hand. And if not, listening to this discussion is the reason I was thinking about it while people were asking, a whole range of questions just now. The reason this project is going to succeed is because of the involvement and the commitment, whether it's Ward 1 or downtown businesses, our legislators. We have almost our entire council on this call. Even though they had a separate presentation just a week ago, they're all here again. And this is the reason that this is going to go forward and is going to succeed, is a continuation of the ideas, the energy, the problem solving that you all bring to it. So I can't thank you enough. Anybody else? Okay. Well, guys, thank you. And then you'll hopefully be hearing from us in the month of April as we bring some of these working teams together. Take care and stay safe. And thank you to our wonderful panelists. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day off, David.
Poor David. Yes, I scheduled